Hello everyone, back to you today's second video. So we're already on January, Friday, having a look at the weather for the next month, and that takes us into the second half of February. We've got a fairly straightforward weather pattern for the rest of January, but we get into February, we have got questions to answer there because it looks like there's a lot of uncertainty as we go through to February, and part of that could be down to what's happening in the stratosphere next week over the North Pole. I'm going to start off with today's second video talking about that, and then we'll have a look at weather next week to 10 days. We'll finish up looking at some potentially quite interesting weather that's coming up over the weekend. I'm not sure quite where things are going on Sunday and into Monday, but I'll show you what's happening with that right at the end of the video. But before I go on with all of that, just say about the ads. The links for articles are all over the pages. Have a browse widgets and click through links. If there's any articles that you're interested in, you have a page website. Thanks so much to do that. There's also video ads, both of pages, which own our content, and you have a look at those. Again, you'll be helping us to pay for our website. January Friday is underneath the link ad, so just scroll down the homepage a little bit more and you'll find it there. So we're going to start off looking at the stratosphere. This is the latest from the GFS. This is at the website metroseal.fa. Find a link to Metroseal on the links page. So this is the North Pole in terms of the temperature at 10 HPA, which is the highest level of the atmosphere over the North Pole. Where we've got these blue colours right now, that's where we've got the cold stratospheric temperatures over the pole. We have got some warm temperatures already across Siberia trying to push in towards the polar region, but not able to do so. Let's run through and see what the latest GFS run 6 o'clock run does. So we go through into the early part of next week. We get a bit of a warming taking place there on the 24th. Actually, that's Tuesday. Quite a significant warming trying to infiltrate into the pole, but still really these blue colours are keeping that at bay. And then we run on through the rest of the week. We get through to the end of the week. Look at all this warmth gathering in a week's time across Siberia. This is 27th of January, a week today. And this is a day that's always been pinpointed right from the very far reaches of the GFS model, 384 hours. 27th of January has always been the day that's pinpointed to start off this stratospheric warming. And here it comes. So we go through the 28th into 29th, and those red colours appear across Siberia, start to move in towards the pole. And then we go through beyond that into 28th and the 29th. Very major warming is taking place. Again, I'm not sure it's going to quite reach the threshold of a sudden stratospheric warming. It certainly is a very significant warming that's occurring in the stratosphere. To get a sudden stratospheric warming defined, you really have to have a reversal of the zonal wind. I'm not sure we're going to quite do that. But nevertheless, this is a very major warming that's occurring in the stratosphere. It should have some effect on the PV, the polar vortex, over the North Pole as we go through into further into February, into sort of week 2, week 3 of February. This is where we go as that very dramatic warming begins to ease off. It leaves us with a displaced cold area, a displaced polar vortex, if you like, and that's starting to push down in towards Europe. It's not killing off the polar vortex, though, so we finish up, as far as we can go, on the 5th of February, still with those blue colours there. So this isn't like what happened in 2013, at the start of January in 2013. We actually killed the polar vortex, really. We had a sudden stratospheric warming that was so strong that it essentially destroyed, for a time, anyway, it did come back later on, but for a time, it destroyed the polar vortex and completely split the PV. I don't think we're going to do that with this warming. Nevertheless, it should displace the polar vortex, I would have thought. It should certainly give it quite a big kicking, and I suspect we will start to see colder air infiltrating out of the pole into some parts of the mid-latitudes being sort of Europe, Atlantic, America, Pacific, and then round into Asia. We should start to see some cold air draining out of the pole as a result of this, but quite where that will be, I don't think we can say with any confidence yet. That's the GFS and still going for a very significant warming. This is from the University of Berlin, and this is the stratospheric forecast from the ECMWF. I haven't used these before, bit of a treat for you. The University of Berlin was where the very first sudden stratospheric warming was observed back in 1952 at the end of January 1952, they observed the very first sudden stratospheric warming, and they've followed through observing the stratosphere ever since. This is the ECMWF forecast for 10 HPA, the same level we were just looking at Meteoseal with the GFS model. This is for 10 HPA again over the North Pole. This is for 192 hours away, 27th of January. These are generated with the midday run of the GFS. So actually this was generated last night, if you like, but they don't appear on this website until the following morning. So we see again, there's the North Pole just there. I'll highlight where the North Pole is. It's up here. British Isles can't really make us out all that well, but we're down here somewhere, and you see those red colours over there. That is the stratospheric warming that's occurring across Siberia on the 27th of January at 10 HPA. We go through to the 28th of January. You see the red colours are deepening and they're starting to push in towards the pole. You make the pole out better now. There's a black cross just there. That is the very top of the North Pole. And then we go through to the end, which is 29th of January, day 10. This would have been day 10 yesterday, last night. Of course, now day 10 is the 30th of January. But anyway, we see again that those red colours are infiltrating into the pole. A very significant major warming event is taking place. Again, I'm not sure it quite will reach the requirement of a southern stratospheric warming. I'm not sure it will quite reverse the zonal winds and turn them easterly. But nevertheless, it does look like a very significant warming event that's taking place there at the end of January at 10 HPA, and it is pushing in towards the North Pole. Temperatures could be going up by something like 60 or 70 degrees at this top layer of the stratosphere at the end of next week. Quite remarkable how these things occur. If you have a look at a little bit lower down, this is 30 HPA, and when we get these warming events at 10 HPA, the top level of stratosphere, what we've got to do is propagate the warmth down into the troposphere. When it gets into the troposphere, that's when it can start to generate the high pressure that produces the blocking that pushes out the cold air. So what can sometimes happen is that you get these warmings occurring at 10 HPA, but they don't propagate down into the layer of the atmosphere, of the troposphere, where weather is taking place. To see whether this is starting to move down into the troposphere, we look at 30 HPA, which is slightly lower, and this is the chart at 192 hours, again 27th of January, and this is at 30 HPA, so it's lower down. You see that we haven't got those red colours on this chart at that point. We've got a bit of warming just there over towards the Canadian side of the Arctic, but you can't really see any sign there on the 27th of January, a week away, at 30 HPA of the warming that we think, pretty confident, is going to be taking place there at 10 HPA. If we go through a bit further into the 28th of January at 30 HPA, again, no real sign of that warmth starting to appear there at 30 HPA. It's still up at 10 HPA. It hasn't come down at this point in to 30 HPA at that lower level. However, we go through to the final chart. This is day 10. Remember, this was generated last night, so it's 29th of January. Now, day 10 is the 30th of January because it was generated last night. Day 10 is 29th of January. And we do see a little bit of warming beginning to appear there at 30 HPA over towards Siberia, and starting to push in towards the pole. I think that is the beginnings of the warming that's occurring at 10 HPA, so that would be just there. That's a sign of the warming that's occurring at 10 HPA, starting to move down just there. But you see, it's very inferior at that point to what's happening at 10 HPA. So we're going to need to keep an eye on these charts and see whether this warming that is going to come off, I think it will come off, it's very well supported at 10 HPA, to see whether it moves down to 30 HPA, and then beyond that, if it gets to 30 HPA, normally it will go into the troposphere. So we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out, but it's all very, very interesting, and it will be interesting next week to see how this starts to work itself out. There's normally a 2-3 week time delay, by the way, on these stratospheric warmings occurring, and them actually having an effect that can be felt in terms of the weather in the troposphere. So don't expect to see an immediate response. And as I say, I don't think we're quite reaching with this the threshold of a sudden stratospheric warming. But it is a very significant warming that's occurring here at 10 HPA. And I think it will have some effect, most definitely, over the Northern Hemisphere. But quite what those effects are and where they're felt remains to be seen. Right, let's go on and have a look at the weather for the next week to 10 days. We'll have a look at the GFS temperature precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks. First of all, red line here, 30-year temperature average. Going to be colder than average from now through into weekend, start of next week. As I say, got a little bit of an interesting situation beginning to appear within the model output for the weekend. I'll get onto that at the very end of the video. We go through to the start or into the middle of next week, those temperatures are lifting up. So we're still forecasting it to turn milder from the middle of the week through to the end of next week and then into that final weekend of January. Beyond that, into start of February, that's February 1st just there. Looks like we're returning close to average precipitation. We've been talking about this all week. Shows that we've got loads of dry weather coming up through the rest of this week. Well, it's only one day left of this week, but through the weekend and into next week. Then the rainfall's coming back into next week. These are trending wetter again for the latter part of next week. Does look like it could turn really quite wet and windy for a time late next week. Now, this period that's looking completely dry over the weekend into next week, I don't think it'll be quite as straightforward as that. There might be some wintry showers, particularly on Sunday and into Monday. Temperature anomalies for the next week. This takes us from the 20th through to 28th of January. Cold average for England and Wales, near normal for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Most parts of Europe looking very cold. Expect to see these charts moderating next week. I think they will moderate, not just for the UK, but for most parts of Europe as well. That will start to see those cold temperature anomalies being pushed back in towards the east of Europe through next week. Precipitation anomalies still more or less drier than average. Expect these to be turning wetter through the course of next week. Looks very wet by way down in the Mediterranean, cold and wet still down there. If you're off to Mallorca, Ibiza, anywhere like that in the central Med, expecting to soak up some late winter sunshine, some midwinter sunshine, expect to feel pretty cold down there. So this is how the GFS is seeing things on Tuesday. Still under high pressure at that point. Still cold and dry for most parts. Trying to bring in slightly milder air to the northwest Scotland. That's being fended off a little bit though on Tuesday. That high pressure still clinging to the east on Wednesday. Now as we start to infiltrate moisture into this high pressure, we might get a bit fogged up through the early part of next week, so that could be a bit of a question mark. There might be some disruptive weather early next week in terms of dense fog, and that will be particularly the central, southern and eastern parts of England, less so the Scotland and Northern Ireland, because by midweek certainly we're starting to re-establish that mild southerly southwesterly wind. And then the winds continue to strengthen into the latter part of next week. So by Friday we're in this southerly flow. That should be stirring up the atmosphere, getting rid of any fog problems, but also starting to bring rain in from the west. But you know, this is a slow old process to be bringing the Atlantic through. So I'm still very unsure, particularly for the southeast, just how much rain we're going to get next week. I'll be surprised if there's much, despite that ensemble we were just looking at, which was for London, looking very wet from around the middle of next week onwards. I've got doubts about how much rain we're going to get down into the southeast still. But certainly from the north and west, it does look quite wet later next week up there. Into the last weekend of January, and it's turning more generally unsettled then. The winds are in from the southwest, so it looks mild there to end January. And we finish up on day 10, which is today, Monday 30th of January, bringing in a westerly flow, and that does look properly unsettled. East central US looking like this. Again, the high pressure holding on through the early part of next week, keeping it dry, mostly dry, cold, probably quite foggy as well, particularly for the south and the east. Middle part of next week, the high pressure still trying to cling on to the east, but the west is turning more unsettled by Thursday 26th of January. Quite windy there as well, with some rain coming in. And then we go through to the end of next week, into that last weekend of January, where we finally push the Atlantic through, takes a band of rain and introduces wet and windy weather there for a sunny 29th of January, ending up on day 10. Monday 30th, looking quite unsettled indeed, with low pressure to the northwest of Scotland, and we're bringing the flow in off the Atlantic to give quite a wet and potentially fairly windy end to January. So the idea is still there. It's been there throughout the past updates that we've been doing over the last week, that we're going to have a lot of cold weather over the weekend into next week. Then middle part of next week it turns wet and windy in the north and west. The southeast may cling on to the cold weather, probably quite foggy into the middle of the week, and then late next week we break that down and introduce the Atlantic for the final weekend of January. Now, as I said, there is just a little bit of a question mark appearing about the weekend. So just finish up with these charts from theweatheroutlook.com. I'm going to show you the upper air temperatures. And this is for today, first of all. This is at 850 HPA. So we see it's quite mild in terms of the upper air temperatures at the moment. We're in those yellow colours. I'll just close in a little bit more. We're in those yellow colours there and looking quite mild. We know it's not as mild as that for England and Wales because we're bringing in a low level continental sort of cold feed from off the continent. So it's not as mild on the surface as it is aloft. There's a classic inversion going on today for England and Wales where it's cold. It is mild though for Scotland, Northern Ireland and much of northwestern England too. Now, if we run through into the weekend, you're going to notice that those yellow colours start to fade to green. So, in terms of the upper atmosphere, it's starting to turn a bit colder over the weekend. And eventually, and I'm not really sure where it comes from, it appears to move up from the south-southwest. On Sunday, we're starting to bring in the -5 isotherm across the country. -5 isotherm is sort of the minimum level that's needed to get sleet and snow. This is really just being brought up from the continent where it's been freezing cold for a long time over the past few days. So we're into Sunday now, 6 o'clock in the morning. We've got the -5 isotherm there over the top of the UK. There's, I think there's like a decaying weather front that's been producing all of this cloud over the past few weeks, still hanging around the central parts of the country. And it might combine with this cold air aloft to sort of re-intensify, and that might produce a little bit of wintry weather on Sunday. I don't think it'll come to too much, but here and there might be some snow around on Sunday and into the start of next week with this -5 isotherm. If I show you the precipitation type forecast, this is all based on the GFS, by the way. So again, this is how we look at midday tomorrow, almost universally dry across the country. But tomorrow evening we begin to get a few light white patches showing up. I think those are sort of snow flurries developing down across the southwest and across parts of Wales tomorrow evening. And as we run through into the early hours of Sunday, we actually bring something a little bit more intense up into the southwest. So that's rain down across southwest England, but it comes into Wales, and that looks like it's actually snow that's going on there. Not just snow flurries, but probably snow showers might be producing a dusting there for some parts of South Wales, especially over the Welsh mountains. And that continues through the course of Sunday into the afternoon. We've certainly got wintry showers being suggested there for Wales, northwest England. Again, something a bit wetter, more like rain, coming into the southwest and southern parts of Wales on Sunday afternoon. And then it looks like it could be something a bit wintry going on there Sunday evening across the North Midlands. So again, that's probably at elevation mostly. But what happens then is we go into the early hours of Monday. We bring quite a heavy rain band up from the southwest across central southern parts of England. And I'm not sure about that at all. But if it did come off, it would be very close to sleet or snow, because the upper air temperatures are still cold at this point, and the surface temperatures will be cold as well. So although that suggests quite heavy rain on Monday across southern parts of the country, the Midlands, southern England, wouldn't be take all that much of an adjustment to turn that wintry. Now, I'm not sure about that. That's very different to what the GFS has been predicting over the past few days. But certainly on Sunday, I think there is the potential for some wintry flurries to be moving up. They actually tomorrow afternoon, Saturday afternoon, evening for the southwest, but probably for places like Wales, possibly the northwest Midlands, up into northwest England, there might be a few sleet and snow showers around on Sunday, and possibly Sunday night into Monday, wet for the south, and that would be very close between rain and snow. So we're going to have to keep an eye on what's happening over the weekend. It's going to be a tricky weekend, I think, with a lot of uncertainty. And then, of course, beyond that, all eyes will be on the stratospheric warming. Right, tomorrow it's a weekend forecast, and we'll also have our first update for ENSO of the year, seeing what's happening in the Pacific Ocean in terms of La Nina, El Nino, all that type kind of thing. That'll be coming up tomorrow with weekend forecast. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.